The auctioneer's voice cracked in the heat, droning through lot numbers nobody wanted. Noor Reyes wiped sweat from her phone screen and nudged her brother. "That's us." "Lot 47. Eli squinted at the slip of paper. "Parcel 14C, Calico Bend. 1.3 miles of dry creek bed. Tax-delinquent for 6 years. He looked up at the sky like he was questioning his life choices. "We're bidding on dirt that doesn't even have water." "That's the point," Noor said, already raising her hand. "Restoration challenge. Creek rehab from zero. The channel will eat it up." The auctioneer barely glanced their way. 20 cents. Going once, nobody else moved. The small crowd of speculators and land flippers stood silent under the courthouse awning, studying their phones or staring into the middle distance like the parcel didn't exist. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." Sold. 20 cents to bidder 18. Eli laughed, sharp and disbelieving. "We just bought a dead river for the price of a gumball." Noor was already filming, phone gimbal steady in her hands. "We just bought a story." 3 days later, they pulled off the county road in Eli's sun-faded pickup, dust plume settling behind them like a curtain closing. Calico Bend spread below, a ghost town that wasn't quite dead, just hollowed out. A few trailers, a gas station with one working pump, buildings that used to be something, now just bones and sheet metal. The creek bed carved through the valley like a scar, bone dry and bleached. Salt crusts gathered in the curves, where water should have pooled. Tumbleweeds wedged against a half-collapsed culvert. The concrete cracked and tilted at an angle that looked wrong, like something had shoved it from below. Noor set up the tripod, while Eli unloaded shovels, sample jars, and a battered cooler that held more gear than food. She framed the shot, herself in a faded work shirt, creek bed stretching behind her, the kind of landscape that looked like failure. "Hey everyone, Noor here." She kept her voice level, professional. "Today, we're starting something different. This is Calico Bend, and that behind me is a creek that hasn't run in over a century. Mining operations in the 1890s supposedly bled it dry. We bought the tax lien for 20 cents, and we're going to find out if we can bring it back." Eli stepped into frame, waving with exaggerated enthusiasm. "And I'm the guy who said this was a terrible idea." "Noted," Noor said, grinning. She clicked off the camera and picked up her field kit. "Let's see what we're working with." The creek bed told a story, but not the one she expected. The wash looked lifeless at first glance, just scattered rock and powder-fine sediment. But as she walked the channel, notebook in hand, patterns emerged. Test pits dotted the landscape, drilled holes spaced with unnatural precision, forming a grid that extended 200 yards upstream. "Eli, look at this." She crouched next to one of the pits, measuring its depth with a folding rule. "These aren't random. They're surveyed." Someone was testing for something. He jogged over, phone already recording B-roll. "Testing for what?" "There's nothing here." "Exactly." Noor pulled out her infiltration kit, a simple cylinder and stopwatch. She poured water into the test ring she'd pressed into the sediment and started the timer. The water vanished in seconds, soaking down uniformly, too fast, too even. "That's not natural permeation. There's a drain under us. Something man-made." Eli filmed the empty ring, then panned to the collapsed culvert downstream. "You think it's connected?" "Maybe." Noor stood, brushing dust from her knees. Her gaze snagged on something else, a boulder near the channel's edge, half buried, with marks she'd missed on the first pass. She moved closer, running her fingers over the stone's face. Shallow pecks grouped in clusters, tallies, 5 marks, then a diagonal slash. 5 more, another slash. What is that? Eli zoomed in with his phone, catching the detail. "I have no idea." Noor traced the pattern. "But it's deliberate. Someone was counting something." They found 3 more waymark stones in the next hour, each one pecked with similar tally clusters, each positioned along the creek's ghost path like ancient trail markers. The precision bothered her. Engineers thought in grids and intervals. Whoever placed these stones wasn't guessing. The culvert drew them back. It sat at a natural choke point, concrete buckling, where the channel narrowed. Noor knelt at its mouth, shining her headlamp into the gap. Water should have flowed through here once, cutting under the old mining road. Instead, debris choked the passage, tumbleweeds, blown sand, rusted tin, and something else. A corner of iron, dark and riveted, wedged under the concrete's broken lip. "Hand me the crowbar." Eli passed it over, already filming. "What did you find?" "Don't know yet." Noor wedged the bar under the culvert's edge and leaned her weight into it. The concrete groaned, shifting an inch. A smell wafted up from below, old and chemical-sweet. Pine pitch, rust, the scent of something sealed for a very long time. She pulled harder. The iron corner shifted, revealing more of itself. A sluice box, industrial-sized, its rivets thick as her thumb. The kind of equipment built to last, built to hold something valuable. "Seth," Eli whispered, then caught himself. "I mean, Noor, are you seeing this?" She was. And beneath the sluice box, visible now in the gap she'd created, was darkness. Not the darkness of packed earth, but the hollow darkness of empty space. A chamber, a void that shouldn't exist under a creek bed. Above them, a shadow wheeled. Noor glanced up and saw it. A raven, unnaturally pale, its feathers almost silver in the harsh sunlight. It circled once, twice, then settled on the rusted road sign that marked the county boundary. Its head tilted, watching them with an intelligence that made her skin prickle. The wind gusted, sudden and sharp, carrying dust that forced her to close her eyes. When she looked again, the bird was gone. The air had gone still, oppressively so, like the moment before a storm that never comes. "We need to get in there," Noor said quietly. Eli lowered his phone. "I was afraid you'd say that." They worked carefully, clearing debris and widening the gap until the culvert's broken edge revealed its secret. The sluice box came free with a grinding scrape of iron on concrete, heavy enough that both of them had to drag it clear. Beneath it, compacted silt gave way to something that made Noor's pulse kick: timbers. Squared beams, notched and fitted, blackened with age, but still solid. "That's a frame," she said. "A built structure." Eli crouched beside her, shining his phone light into the gap. "Built for what?" Noor didn't answer. She was already lowering herself through the opening, feet finding purchase on the timber frame, headlamp cutting through darkness that felt too large, too deliberate. Her boots hit stone and she straightened, sweeping the light around her. Oh my God! It was a gallery, not a natural cave or a collapsed mine drift, but a purpose-built drain tunnel running parallel to the creek bed above. Stone walls mortared and smooth, timber bracing at regular intervals. And running down the center, a channel cut into the bedrock itself, dry now, but showing the unmistakable watermarks of flow, of volume, of theft. "Noor?" Eli's voice echoed from above. "Talk to me." "It's a diversion," she called back. "Someone built an underground canal. They stole the creek." She heard him curse softly, then the scrape of him climbing down. His light joined hers, and together they stood in the gallery, taking in the scale of it. This wasn't some prospector's side tunnel. This was engineering, capital and conspiracy. The gallery stretched 50 feet in one direction before narrowing into a collapse. In the other direction, it opened into a wider chamber, and that's where they found the crates. Wooden boxes, varnished with pine pitch to keep out moisture, stacked with military precision. Noor approached the nearest one and ran her hand over its lid. No lock, just a brass clasp green with age. She flipped it open. Inside, ore. Unrefined concentrate, dark and heavy, studded with gold flecks that caught her headlamp like stars. And something else, a mineral she didn't immediately recognize, silvery gray with a crystalline structure that looked almost metallic. "Telluride," Eli breathed. He was filming everything now, hands shaking slightly. "That's rare." "That's really rare." Noor pulled out her phone and started mapping, using the LiDAR scanner to build a three-dimensional model of the gallery. The measurements matched the spacing of the test pits above, confirming what she'd suspected. This entire grid was part of a single engineered system. Whoever built this knew exactly what they were doing. More crates yielded more ore, each one tagged with a brass plate, stamped with letters she could barely make out through the tarnish. Kincaid. And then she found the ledgers. They were wrapped in oiled cloth, bound with waxed cord, hidden in a smaller crate tucked behind the others like an afterthought. Noor lifted the first one out carefully. The leather cover was water-stained but intact, and when she opened it, the pages crackled with age. Ink, brown with time, filled the columns in a precise accountant's hand. Eli moved closer, reading over her shoulder. The entries were organized like a shipping manifest, but the contents made them both go silent. Diversion. Expend, 4,200 gal day clearance. Plot 7, Martinez, J & Sons, removed clearance. Claim 19A, Yavapai Collective, removed clearance. Shaft D17, Chen, A & Crew, removed. The word removed appeared again and again, always beside names. Always beside tally marks that matched the pecked stones above. They weren't counting water, Noor whispered. They were counting people. Eli's face had gone pale. Noor, we need to call someone. Right now. She nodded slowly, pulling out her phone, but there was no signal this deep. They'd have to climb back up. She photographed every page she could, hands shaking now, then carefully wrapped the ledgers again and placed them back in the crate. As she did, she noticed the pale raven was gone from where it had perched on the road sign. She scanned the sky but saw nothing. The wind had died completely, leaving an eerie stillness that felt like the moment before something breaks. Chain of custody, Noor said, forcing herself into engineer mode. We document everything. No touching, no moving anything else until we get the right people here. Who are the right people for this? Eli asked. Noor thought of the workshop she'd attended last spring, the tribal water monitors discussing aquifer theft and historical diversions. One name came to mind. Owen Blackwater, Yavapai Ranger, hydrologist. A man who'd spoken about stolen water rights with a quiet intensity that had stayed with her. She climbed back up into daylight and checked her phone. One bar of signal flickering. She typed quickly, found something at Calico Bend, man-made drain gallery. Ledgers with names and clearances. Tally stones. Need your eyes on this. The message hung, sending, then finally went through. His reply came back in less than a minute. On my way. Don't touch the tallies. Owen Blackwater arrived as the sun dropped behind the ridge, turning the valley into a study of long shadows and copper light. He climbed out of a dust-covered ranger truck, lean and unhurried, carrying the kind of stillness that came from years of listening to land. Noor met him at the culvert, already explaining, but he raised a hand. Show me the stones first. They walked the creek bed together, Eli filming from a respectful distance. Owen crouched at each waymark boulder, running his fingers over the pecked tallies the same way Noor had, but reading something she couldn't see. At the third stone he spoke. These aren't mining marks. What are they? Noor asked. Debt tallies. His voice was quiet, controlled. Old-style counting. My grandfather showed me something like this on the Kenyan trails. Communal claims track draws like this. Water or shares, he stood jaw tight. But these have been repurposed. Someone took a system meant for equity and turned it into a ledger of theft. He moved to the fourth stone, the largest, and pointed to a cluster that stood apart from the others. 23 groups of 5, plus 3 additional marks. That's not water. That's people, disappeared. The word hung between them like a curse. Noor handed him her phone with the ledger photos. Owen scrolled through them, his expression hardening with each page. When he reached the entry about the Yavapai Collective, his thumb stopped moving. These names, he said. I know some of these families. Eli lowered his camera. How? Because they're still around. Still asking questions their grandparents couldn't answer. Owen looked up, meeting Noor's eyes. This isn't treasure. This is evidence of murder. He pulled out his own phone and dialed. Dr. Joe? It's Owen Blackwater. I'm at Calico Bend with Noor Reyes. We need you here. A pause. No, tonight. Because we just found the Kincaid archive. Within 20 minutes, a FaceTime call connected them to a woman in a cramped space that looked like a shipping container converted into an office. Books and maps covered every surface. Dr. Hannah Jo pushed her glasses up and leaned closer to the screen. Show me the ore tags, she said. No preamble. Noor angled her phone to show the brass plates. Hannah's eyes went sharp. Kincaid Syndicate, 1890s robber baron operation. They ran silver and gold claims all through this valley, but they were investigated twice for fraudulent water rights. She typed rapidly on a laptop they couldn't see. Those telluride samples you found? That's Cripple Creek grade ore. Worth a fortune then, worth more now. What about the ledgers? Owen asked. If they're genuine, they're the missing link. The Kincaid family always claimed they abandoned Calico Bend because the creek ran dry naturally. But there were rumors, depositions that disappeared, immigrant miners who vanished. Hannah's face was grim. If you've got shipping records and clearance orders with names, that's premeditated displacement. That's conspiracy to murder. Noor felt something shift in her chest, the weight of understanding. They engineered a water famine and made it look like nature, Hannah finished. I'm leaving now. 3-hour drive. Don't let anyone near that site, the call ended. Owen stood, scanning the ridgeline above them. A sound cut him off. Small but wrong, the rattle of displaced rock, somewhere upslope in the gathering dark. Eli spun, his phone light sweeping the hillside. Someone's there. They stood frozen, listening. Footsteps careful and retreating. Then further away, the cough of an engine starting. A vehicle pulled away on the ridge road. No lights, just the growl of acceleration fading into distance. They've been listening, Owen said quietly. They know what you found. Noor's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Congratulations on your purchase. Let's talk before you do something rash. Victor Kincaid, 30 Owen, read it over her shoulder, and his expression went flat. The syndicate's heir. He owns the sand and gravel operation upstream. Half the water options in this valley. He looked at Noor. You just made a very powerful enemy. Good, Noor said, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. Because now he knows we're not walking away. They made camp in the pickup bed, taking turns on watch. The pale raven didn't return, and the stillness felt less like peace and more like something holding its breath. Around midnight, headlights appeared on the county road, moving slow. A sheriff's cruiser rolled to a stop 30 yards away, lights cutting through the dark. A man climbed out, unhurried, adjusting a belt heavy with equipment. Sheriff Lyle Bram, by the name on his door. He approached with a folksy smile, but his eyes were calculating, taking in every detail of their setup. I heard we had some new landowners. Thought I'd swing by, make sure everything's on the up and up. His gaze lingered on the culvert, on the disturbed earth. Y'all got the right permits for excavation work? Noor stepped forward, steady. We have restoration permits through BLM. Would you like to see them? His smile didn't waver. That'd be just fine. Dawn was still an hour away, but Noor could already tell. The real fight was just beginning. Sheriff Bram took his time examining their permits, holding each page up to his flashlight like he was searching for watermarks. The sky was beginning to bruise with pre-dawn light, turning everything gray and uncertain. BLM restoration permit, he read aloud. Stream habitat enhancement. That's real nice. He folded the paper with deliberate care. Of course, that doesn't cover excavation of historical sites, and it sure doesn't cover disturbing what might be county infrastructure. County infrastructure. Eli's voice had an edge. That drain gallery is over a century old. Then it's a historical structure, which means you need a whole different set of permits. Bram's smile was all teeth. Cultural resources, archaeological survey, environmental impact assessment. Could take months to sort out. He pulled out a citation pad. Meanwhile, I'm going to have to post this as a safety hazard. Unstable culvert, unmarked excavation, public risk. Noor felt the trap closing. We haven't violated any codes. Well, now that's for the county to decide. He started writing. I'm recommending immediate closure pending full inspection. For everyone's protection. Headlights swept across them as another vehicle pulled up. Dr. Hannah Jo climbed out of a battered Subaru, her hair in a messy ponytail, carrying a weathered messenger bag that looked older than she was. She took in the scene with sharp eyes and walked straight to the tailgate of Eli's truck. You must be Sheriff Bram, she said without looking at him. Dr. Hannah Jo, Mining History Institute. She spread documents across the tailgate, holding them down with rocks. These are shipping manifests from the Denver Assay Office, 1892 through 1897. These tags, she tapped a photograph of the brass plates, match lot numbers from Kincaid Syndicate shipments worth roughly $4 million in period dollars. Bram drifted closer despite himself.
That so?
And these, Hannah laid out photocopies of handwritten ledgers, are payment records that match the ore tags. Same handwriting, same date conventions, same catalog system. She looked up, meeting his gaze. Which means everything in that gallery is material evidence in a century-old fraud case that was never resolved because the principals disappeared. She smiled, sharp as broken glass. Along with quite a few witnesses, the sheriff's expression flickered just for a moment. Something cold moved behind his folksy mask. That's a matter for historians, ma'am. My concern is public safety. Your concern, Owen said quietly, stepping forward, is that this site falls under federal jurisdiction. Treaty land, water rights, and now documented cultural theft. County codes don't apply. Bram's jaw tightened. He finished writing the citation with quick, angry strokes and handed it to Noor. You'll be hearing from the county administrator. He walked back to his cruiser, climbed in, and sat there for a long moment before starting the engine. As he pulled away, his taillights seemed to linger, watching. He'll call Victor before he hits the county line, Owen said. Hannah was already photographing the ore samples, her camera clicking methodically. Good. Let them know we're documenting everything. The moment they try to hide this, they prove consciousness of guilt. Noor's phone buzzed. The unknown number again, but this time it was a call. She hesitated, then answered on speaker. Ms. Reyes. The voice was smooth, educated, practiced. Victor Kincaid. I hope the sheriff wasn't too much of a bother. Small-town bureaucracy can be such a headache. What do you want? Noor kept her voice level. To help. I've seen your channel. Very impressive work. That creek restoration in Riverside County. Brilliant. I'd love to sponsor your next project. He paused, letting the offer breathe. In fact, why don't we partner on this one? My company has the equipment, the expertise. We could stabilize that culvert properly, maybe even restore some flow. Good PR for both of us. In exchange for what? Access, shared documentation, a chance to honor my family's history properly instead of letting rumors define it. His tone shifted, just slightly. And, of course, ensuring everyone stays safe. These old mine works can be terribly dangerous. Collapses, toxic gas pockets, unstable ground. I'd hate to see anyone get hurt. The threat was delicate, wrapped in concern, but unmistakable. I'll think about it, Noor said. Please do. But don't take too long. These things have a way of resolving themselves if left unattended. He hung up. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Hannah had stopped photographing. That was a threat. That was a promise, Owen corrected. He scanned the ridgeline, eyes narrowed. He's going to move fast. Above them, cutting through the morning haze, the pale raven appeared. It circled once, its white feathers stark against the grey sky, then lifted sharply and vanished over the ridge. Owen watched it go, his expression unreadable. Storm before storm, he muttered. Noor pulled up her email and started typing, attaching every photo, every measurement, every document they had. The recipient, Carmen Duarte, BLM Land Fraud Investigation Unit. They'd met once, briefly, at a water rights symposium. Carmen had been the one who'd told her, if you ever find something, don't call the local sheriff. Call federal. She hit send and felt the weight shift slightly. Not gone, but distributed. Carmen's reply came through within an hour. Don't move a thing. I'm en route. ETA 14 Carmen Duarte arrived precisely at 2 o'clock, driving a white government SUV that looked like it had never seen dirt until today. She climbed out wearing hiking boots and a BLM field vest, her dark hair pulled back severely, carrying a hard-sided case that Noor recognized, evidence documentation kit, Ms. Reyes, Dr. Joe, Mr. Blackwater. She shook hands with each of them, her grip firm and brief. Show me everything. In order. For the next 3 hours, Carmen worked with the methodical precision of someone who'd lost cases on chain of custody errors. She photographed every crate, every ledger page, every ore sample. She took GPS coordinates, measured the gallery's dimensions, swabbed for environmental contaminants. She had Noor, Eli, Owen, and Hannah each provide sworn statements, recorded and time-stamped. When she finally emerged from the gallery, her face was set. This is a federal case. Multiple jurisdictions, but I'm filing for emergency protective custody of the site under the Archaeological Resources Protection Act and documented water rights fraud. She looked at Noor. That means no one touches anything. Not you, not the county, not Kincaid. How long will that hold? Eli asked. Depends on how fast his lawyers move. Carmen sealed the last evidence bag. But I'm also filing for a temporary restraining order against any heavy equipment within 500 feet. That'll take longer to challenge. Her radio crackled. She listened for a moment, then keyed the mic. Copy, I'll check it. She looked at the group. Local news just picked up something. Kincaid Industries issued a press release an hour ago. Hannah pulled it up on her phone. Revitalizing Calico Bend. A vision for sustainable development. She skimmed, her expression darkening. He's announcing a lithium brine pilot project. Says he's been quietly acquiring land options to bring jobs and green energy to a forgotten valley. She scrolled further. The map shows his project area. It includes this creek. He's trying to bury us in good news, Noor said, and force a timeline, Owen added. If he's got a development plan filed, he can argue that delaying it causes economic harm. Carmen made a call, spoke in clipped legal shorthand, then hung up. My supervisor is escalating, but you need to understand something. She looked at each of them. The moment this goes public, they'll come after your credibility. They'll say you're treasure hunters, opportunists, trying to shake down a legitimate business. Don't give them ammunition. Don't post anything, don't talk to reporters. Not yet. Noor nodded slowly, feeling the restraint like a physical pressure. Every instinct said to document, to share, to make this public before it could be hidden. But Carmen was right. Rush testimony got picked apart. A vehicle rumbled up the access road, dusty and loud. An old station wagon with wood paneling and a cracked windshield pulled to a stop. The driver's door opened, and a woman in her 70s climbed out. Wiping her hands on her jeans, Aunt Pilar, Eli said, surprised and relieved in equal measure. Pilar Reyes surveyed the scene with the kind of gaze that missed nothing. She walked to the truck bed and set down a dented tin. Tamales. Still warm. You all look like you forgot to eat. Then she pulled a rolled paper from her canvas bag. And I brought you something else. She spread it on the tailgate. A hand-drawn map, old paper gone yellow and soft, and covered in careful ink lines and notations in Spanish and what looked like Yavapai pictographs. Where did you get this? Hannah breathed, leaning close. Daybook sale 15 years back. Old miner's widow. Cleaning house. Nobody wanted it because nobody could read half of it. Pilar traced a line with one weathered finger. But I kept it. Figured someday it might matter. The map showed Calico Bend as it had been. The creek running full. Claims marked with names, and a series of symbols along the wash that matched exactly the positions of the tally stones. Owen pulled out his phone and overlaid the map with his GPS points. Perfect alignment, this mark here, Pilar said, pointing to a cluster of symbols. That's labeled Communal Claim, Yavapai Alvarez Cooperative. See the date? 1891, year before Kincaid bought out the water company. Hannah was already taking photographs. This is provenance. Legal standing that predates the Kincaid theft. Carmen examined the map, then looked at Pilar. Ma'am, I need to document this as evidence. Can you provide a statement about how you acquired it? Of course I can, Pilar smiled. But first you all eat. Can't fight on empty. They ate standing up, watching the ridge, watching the road. The tamales were perfect, the kind of food that carried memory and care. As the sun dropped toward the horizon, Aunt Pilar packed up her tin and prepared to leave. You be careful, she told Noor. Kincaid's always been good at making trouble look like accidents. As if summoned by the warning, Eli pointed upstream. Lights! High on the ridge past the county road, floodlights blazed to life. The rumble of heavy equipment carried across the valley. Diesel engines firing up in the growing dark. That's inside the 500-foot buffer, Carmen said. Already on her radio, Owen grabbed binoculars. Loader and dump trucks. 2 of them. Unscheduled maintenance, Carmen said flatly, listening to her radio. Kincaid's site supervisor says it's emergency repair work on an irrigation gate. At 9 o'clock at night? Eli's voice was sharp, Carmen's jaw set. I'm calling for backup, but nearest rangers are 2 hours out. She looked at Noor. Can that gallery handle a flash flood? Noor's stomach dropped. If they open that gate and dump spoil in the channel, the water will funnel straight into the culvert. Everything we found will be buried or washed away. Then we don't let them, Owen said quietly. They worked by headlamp and phone light, moving with the kind of speed that came from pure necessity. Noor sketched calculations in her field notebook, factoring slope, volume, and flow dynamics. If Victor opened the irrigation gate, they'd have maybe 15 minutes before the surge hit. We can't stop it, she said, thinking aloud, but we can redirect it. How? Eli was already hauling sandbags from the truck bed, part of their original restoration supplies, wing walls. We build temporary berms to shunt the flow around the culvert, not through it. She pointed upstream. There's a natural low point 30 yards north. If we can guide the water there, it'll bypass the gallery and rejoin the main wash downstream. Owen nodded. Siphon tubes for the first wave, sandbags for the sustained flow. Carmen helped stack bags while maintaining radio contact with her office. Legal's working on an emergency injunction, but the judge is in Phoenix. We need to hold them for 2 hours minimum. Up on the ridge, the equipment sounds grew louder, closer. Hannah stayed with the gallery, covering the ledges in tarps and waterproof cases. If they breach before we're ready, they won't, Noor said, with more confidence than she felt. They built fast. Noor positioned siphon tubes using head, differential and gravity, calculating angles by feel and experience. Eli and Owen stacked sandbags in a chevron pattern, creating a wing that would catch and redirect. Carmen set out chemical glow sticks to mark safe paths, emergency footing for when the chaos hit. A truck door slammed upstream. Voices carried in the dark, rough and urgent. One voice rose above the others, uncertain. I'm telling you, they're down there right now. We dump this. We're burying people. Then they should have taken the buyout. Different voice, cold. Boss says bury it. We bury it. This ain't right, man. There's kids down there. No kids, just some hydrologist with a camera. You want your hazard pay or not? A pause, then the first voice again, quieter. Yeah, I want it. Noor recognized the sound that followed, hydraulic rams extending, a dump bed tilting. She looked at Owen. They're starting. Then a different sound cut through the night. Water. Not the trickle of a creek coming back to life, but the roar of a gate opening, thousands of gallons released all at once, an artificial flash flood aimed like a weapon. Here it comes, Eli shouted. The wall of water hit the upper wash, a churning mass of silt and force. Noor's siphon tubes caught the first wave, pulling flow through plastic channels that bent and shuddered, but held. The sandbag wing wall deflected. The rest, sending water sheeting sideways toward the natural gap. But it wasn't enough. The volume was too great, the surge too violent. Water began overtopping the bags, probing for the culvert, for the gallery beneath. Noor grabbed a spare siphon tube and jammed it into the overflow, creating a second channel. Her hands shook with cold and adrenaline. Owen waded into knee-deep current to reinforce the wing wall's anchor point, stacking rocks to hold the bags in place. Above them, an engine revved. Then another sound, metal on metal, sharp and wrong. A hydraulic line cut or broken, shrieking as pressure bled out. The loader's engine died abruptly. What the hell? The cold voice from before, angry now. Tuck, what did you do? Saved your dumbass from a manslaughter charge. The uncertain voice, no longer uncertain. That's what. Lights swept across the hillside, sirens, multiple vehicles coming fast. Carmen's backup had arrived early, or maybe she'd called someone closer. A loudspeaker crackled to life, amplified voice cutting through the chaos. "This is BLM Special Agent Duarte. You are in violation of a federal emergency order. Shut down all equipment and step away from the vehicles." The water surge began to weaken, the irrigation gate's reservoir emptying. Noor's redirect held, guiding the last of the flow around the gallery and into the bypass channel. Mud and debris, but not catastrophic, not burial. As the current slowed to a trickle, they stood in the wash, soaked and shaking, watching rangers climb the ridge with flashlights and badges. Carmen moved past them, phone pressed to her ear, coordinating. Arrests and evidence seizure with the clipped efficiency of someone who'd done this before. Eli sat down hard on a sandbag, breathing like he'd run a marathon. "Did we just win?" Noor finished. "Maybe. For tonight." Owen was looking upstream, past the lights and chaos. The pale raven had returned, cutting low through the rain-scrubbed air, its white feathers vivid against the dark. It circled once, then settled on the loader's dead bucket, a small, pale sentinel watching them watching it. Dawn came slowly, revealing the damage. Drag marks in the mud where someone had tried to pull crates from the gallery before the water hit. Deep ruts from the dump trucks, now impounded and silent on the ridge. And there, half buried in silt, Carmen found it. A burner phone, its screen cracked but still lit with unread messages. She bagged it carefully, her expression grim satisfaction. Text logs, timestamps, orders to bury it and go. Signed off with a number that's going to lead somewhere useful. Noor watched the sun light up the valley, turning the wet earth golden. The gallery was intact, the ledgers were safe, and the Greek, for the first time in over a century, held water again. Not much, just the remnants of last night's flood, but enough to catch the light, enough to remember what it had been. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "No," Carmen agreed. "But now they have to fight us in court, and in court, evidence wins." On the loader's bucket, the pale raven preened its feathers and watched the day begin. Hannah worked through the night in Eli's truck bed, ledgers spread across a folding table, laptop glowing in the darkness. She cross-referenced entries with Aunt Pilar's daybook, building a network of names and dates that mapped theft with terrible precision. At 4 a.m, she found it. Noor. Her voice was quiet but urgent. "You need to see this." Noor climbed into the truck bed, coffee in hand, exhausted but wired. Hannah pointed to a ledger entry dated September 14th, 1896. Clearance, shaft D17, Chen A. And crew, removed. Incident staged as collapse. Witnesses, none. Recovery, negative. Below it, in different ink, a note, "Family inquiry 1897. Denied. Claim transferred." "Alvaro Chen," Hannah said. "There's more. He had a wife, Elena. She filed 3 petitions with the territorial court, all dismissed. Then she disappears from records entirely." She pulled up a genealogy database on her laptop. "But Elena was pregnant when Alvaro died. The child survived. There's a line." Noor felt something shift in her chest. A descendant. "Emma Alvarez Chen. Lives in Palo Verde, 40 miles east. She's a math teacher." Hannah's face was drawn. "I reached out last night. She's been trying to piece together her family history for years. She has a locket with a photo and a name she could never explain." Before Noor could respond, gravel crunched under tires. A hybrid sedan pulled up and a woman in her 30s climbed out, carrying recording equipment and a messenger bag covered in podcast stickers. "Nia Sloan," she introduced herself, shaking hands with quick efficiency. "Investigative podcast, Fault Lines. I've been following water rights cases in the Southwest. And when I heard whispers about Calico Bend, I had to come." Carmen emerged from her SUV where she'd been sleeping in shifts. Her expression was wary. "Ms. Sloan, I know your work. You sued a refinery in New Mexico, And one on appeal, Nia said evenly. I'm careful with sources, Agent Duarte. I'm not here to blow your case. Then why are you here? Because stories like this disappear if nobody tells them. Nia looked at Noor. You found something that powerful people want buried. Going public is risky, but staying silent. She shook her head. That's how they win. Owen stepped forward. If this goes public, it has to be done right. Not treasure hunters, not gold. Water rights and families. Restitution, not spectacle. Noor felt the weight of the decision. She'd been the whistleblower before, knew how exposure could protect and how it could destroy. But Owen was right. This wasn't her story to tell alone. We do it carefully, she said. No locations, no specifics that compromise the site. We focus on the theft, the names, the families. Nia nodded. I can work with that. Let me interview each of you separately, just audio. I'll frame it as an investigation into historical water fraud. Lead with the human cost. Hannah pulled Carmen aside. While they're doing that, I need to contact Emma Chen. She deserves to know before this becomes public. They worked through the morning. Nia recorded careful interviews, her questions sharp but fair. She pushed for details but respected boundaries, building a narrative that centered the stolen creek and disappeared miners. Around noon, a pickup Noor recognized pulled up. Tuck Beaumont climbed out, looking like he hadn't slept. His hands shook slightly as he approached. I brought something, he said, not quite meeting their eyes. He handed Carmen a manila folder. Dump logs from last night, time-stamped GPS from the trucks, pay stubs showing hazard bonuses for special projects, and text messages from Victor's supervisor telling me to bury the site and keep my mouth shut. Carmen opened the folder, scanning quickly. Her expression didn't change, but Noor saw her shoulders straighten. Why now? Tuck swallowed hard. Dr. Zhou, when you were talking yesterday, you said the name Beaumont. Sarah Beaumont, immigrant miner, 1894. He pulled a faded photograph from his wallet. That's my great-grandmother. I grew up hearing she died in California, that we didn't know much about her past. But she didn't die in California, did she? Hannah checked her notes. Sarah Beaumont is listed in the clearance logs. March 1894. No incident staging noted, just removal. Tuck's jaw worked. I've been taking Kincaid money for 5 years. Hazard pay. Get my head down because my sister's sick and the insurance is good. He looked at the gallery entrance. But I can't anymore. Not if I'm taking money built on my own family's murder. Carmen photographed every page in the folder, then sealed the originals in evidence bags. Mr. Beaumont, you're going to need to give a formal statement. And you should probably get a lawyer. I know. He nodded slowly. Worth it. By sunset, Naya had her episode assembled. She played it for the group before uploading, a 20-minute piece titled The Theft of a River. It opened with the sound of dry wind. Then Noor's voice describing the test pits and the engineered silence. Owen spoke about stolen water rights and tribal claims erased by false scarcity. Hannah detailed the ledger's documentation of systematic murder disguised as misfortune. This is good, Carmen said quietly. It doesn't compromise the investigation, and it makes it a lot harder for them to quietly make this disappear. Noor gave the nod. Nia uploaded. Within 2 hours, the episode had 3,000 downloads. Within 4, it had 20,000. By midnight, news outlets were calling Nia for interviews, and Carmen's phone was ringing with calls from supervisors and attorneys, and Victor Kincaid scheduled a community forum at the old Grange Hall for the following evening. He's going to try to control the narrative, Owen said. Turn this into locals versus outsiders. Then we show up, Noor replied. And we bring the ledgers. The Grange Hall smelled of dust and decades, its wooden walls covered with faded agricultural awards and photographs of town founders. Every seat was filled, people standing along the walls. Tension thick enough to taste. Victor Kincaid stood at the front, looking every inch the benevolent magnate in pressed jeans and a shirt that cost more than most people's monthly rent. A projection screen behind him showed architectural renderings of the proposed lithium facility. Clean lines, solar panels, smiling workers in hard hats. Thank you all for coming, he began, his voice warm and confident. I know there's been a lot of noise lately. A lot of outsiders making claims about our valley's history. I want to set the record straight. He clicked to the next slide. Job projections, economic impact estimates, tax revenue. This lithium project represents 300 jobs. Real careers for people who've watched their neighbors leave for work. Green energy for a state that desperately needs it. A future for Calico Bend. Murmurs of approval rippled through parts of the crowd. Now I understand some people have found things on the old Calico Creek property. Historical artifacts, mining equipment. That's wonderful. It's part of our heritage, and I fully support preserving it. In fact, I've already reached out to the County Historical Society about creating a museum display. He paused, letting the reasonable tone settle. But let's not let rumor and speculation derail real progress. My family has been part of this valley for over a century. We've weathered boom and bust, drought and flood. We're not the villains some podcast would have you believe. Noor felt eyes turning toward her, some curious, some hostile. She sat in the third row with Eli, Owen and Hannah. Carmen stood near the back, arms crossed, watching everything. Victor continued. I'm told that a young woman with a YouTube channel and some out-of-town academics are making serious accusations based on documents they can't verify. Documents that conveniently would make their find worth millions. He smiled sadly. I don't question their intentions, but I do question their judgment. Hannah stood up. I can verify them. The room went quiet. Victor's smile didn't waver. And you are? Dr. Hannah Zhou, Mining History Institute. I've authenticated 19th century mining records for 3 doctoral dissertations, 2 federal land cases, and the Smithsonian. The ledgers found at Calico Bend match period handwriting conventions, ink composition, and paper stock. The tags correspond to documented Kincaid shipments, and the entries detailing clearances include names of people who filed legal claims that were mysteriously dismissed after they disappeared. She sat down. Someone in the back started clapping, then stopped when others turned to stare. Victor's expression cooled by a degree. Historical interpretation is subjective, Doctor. My ancestors ran a difficult operation in difficult times. Mining was dangerous work. Accidents happened. 23 separate accidents, Owen said, standing. All conveniently removing people who held water rights or claims that blocked your family's expansion. Mr. Blackwater, isn't it? Victor's voice took on an edge. Tribal water monitor. I respect your position, but this is sounding less like history and more like agenda. Before Owen could respond, the hall side door opened. A woman entered, young and quiet, carrying a small cloth bag. She moved to the front row and stood, not quite facing Victor, but not hiding either. My name is Emma Alvarez Chen, she said. Her voice was soft, but it carried. I teach algebra at Palo Verde High School. I'm also the great-great-granddaughter of Alvaro Chen. She opened the cloth bag and pulled out a locket on a thin chain. This has been in my family for 4 generations. Inside is a photograph and a name no one could ever explain to me. My abuela said it was important, but she didn't know why. Just that we should keep it. Emma opened the locket. The photograph was faded, a young man in work clothes, serious-faced and hopeful. Yesterday, Dr. Zhou showed me a ledger entry. Alvaro Chen, September 14, 1896. Shaft D17. Incident staged as collapse. Her voice shook. That's the date my family always said he died in a mining accident. But it wasn't an accident, was it? And the room had gone completely still. Noor stood and walked to the projection screen where she'd set up her laptop. Can I show something? Victor looked like he wanted to refuse, but too many eyes were watching. He stepped aside with tight courtesy. Noor played a 1-minute video she'd edited that afternoon. Her drone footage of the creek bed, overlaid with a simple animation showing the drain gallery's position, the test pits, the waymark stones. Then photos of the ledger entries, redacted to show only the pattern, diversion amounts, clearance tallies, dates that match disappearances. Someone built a machine to steal a creek, she said, and they murdered anyone who stood in the way. The evidence isn't subjective. It's engineered. Someone in the crowd stood up. An older man, weathered face. My grandfather used to talk about that creek. Said it died overnight, like something choked it. He always said there was more to it, but nobody would listen. Another voice, the Martinezes. They had a homestead up valley. Whole family just gone one spring. Victor's expression had frozen, the benevolent mask slipping. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're letting fear and conspiracy turn our history into something ugly. Our history is ugly, Emma said quietly. My history? And I'd like it back. Sheriff Bram stood from where he'd been leaning against the back wall. A society celle de Tiundern. Folks, let's not get carried away. We've got official investigations happening. Let's let the proper authorities handle this, like you handled the sabotage attempt. Carmen's voice cut through. Or the burner phone with orders to bury evidence? Bram's face went red. That's an ongoing investigation. You can't. I can tell this community that federal charges are being prepared against individuals who attempted to destroy a protected archaeological site. Carmen's voice was ice. And that obstruction by local law enforcement is part of that investigation. The hall erupted. Voices arguing, some defending Victor, others demanding answers. Through it all, Victor stood rigid at the front, his carefully constructed presentation demolished. Outside, thunder rumbled. Through the dusty window, Noor saw it, the pale raven perched on the Grange's weather vane. Its white feathers caught the last of the daylight as storm clouds rolled over the ridge. The wind picked up suddenly, rattling the old building's roof. The raven lifted, circled once, and vanished into the darkening sky. Noor's phone buzzed. A text from Tuck, final dump, midnight, Victor's crew. They're going to bury everything. All of it. She showed it to Carmen. Call everyone you can, Carmen said. Netu say, the Gaur Zest Moon. We need bodies at that site, now. The storm built slowly, thunder rolling across the valley like a promise. Noor stood at the creek bed, wind whipping her hair, calculating impossible odds. 2 dump trucks and a loader had already staged on the ridge, their running lights visible through the gathering dark. Carmen's backup was still 40 minutes out. We can't stop them with sandbags this time, Eli said. Not if they're serious. We don't stop them, Noor replied, her mind racing through hydraulics and decades-old engineering. We use them. She grabbed her field notebook, sketching rapidly. The drain gallery. It was built to divert the creek, right? Steal the water by channeling it underground. But the system works both ways. If we reverse the flow, open the vents, pull the boards that seal the upper access points, Owen caught on immediately. We turn their flood into the creek's resurrection. Exactly. When they dump and release that water, instead of drowning the evidence, we route it through the gallery, back into the original channel. For the first time in 130 years, the creek flows where it's supposed to. Hannah stared at her. That's brilliant. And insane. Mostly insane, Noor admitted. But it's the only play we have. They split up, working with desperate efficiency. Noor and Owen crawled into the gallery with crowbars and sledgehammers, identifying the boards and stone blocks that had been used to seal the original channel outlets. Hannah and Aunt Pilar, who'd arrived with a truck full of neighbors and cousins, organized a bucket brigade to protect the ledgers under tarps and weighted cargo nets. Eli coordinated from the surface, marking safe paths with glow sticks and keeping Carmen updated on the approaching vehicles. Tuck appeared out of the darkness, breathing hard. They're moving. 5 minutes, maybe less. Victor's supervisor is running the crew. He's got bonuses for everyone if they finish before federal backup arrives. Then help me pull these boards, Noor said. Inside the gallery, the work was brutal. Century-old wood had swelled and bonded with stone. Noor hammered and pried, her hands blistering, sweat stinging her eyes. Owen worked beside her, methodical and tireless, leveraging boards that hadn't moved since the 1890s. There, Noor gasped as a section of blocking suddenly gave way. Cool air rushed through the gap, flowing toward the sealed channel. That's the main trunk. One more section and the path is clear. Above them, the roar of heavy equipment grew louder. Dump truck beds began to tilt. Noor, they're releasing! Eli's voice echoed down. Water hit the upper wash with a sound like freight trains colliding. The surge was massive, far more than the previous attempt. Victor wasn't trying to bury evidence this time. He was trying to scour the valley clean. Noor pulled the last board free and scrambled backward as water exploded into the gallery. For a heart-stopping moment, she thought she'd miscalculated, that the ancient drain would collapse under the pressure. But the stone-lined channel held, and the water did exactly what 130 years of engineering had designed it to do. It flowed. Down through the gallery, building speed and force, then erupting from the outlet vents she'd opened. Water roared into the original creek bed. The sound was immense, primal, a voice that had been silenced for generations suddenly remembering how to speak. On the surface, Aunt Pilar's bucket brigade held the line, protecting the ledges as water sheeted around them but not over them. Hannah grabbed Nia's microphone and held it toward the creek, recording the sound of return. The loader on the ridge tried to maneuver for another dump, but Tuck was already there. He cut the hydraulic line with wire cutters, and the machine slewed sideways, bucket dropping harmlessly as pressure bled out. Sirens cut through the storm. Carmen's voice boomed over a loudspeaker, reading the federal freeze order, her words mixing with thunder and the roar of restored water. Through the rain, cutting low and fast, the pale raven appeared. It flew directly over the surging creek, its white feathers luminous against the dark, then lifted skyward and vanished into the storm. Victor's trucks stood frozen on the ridge, surrounded by federal vehicles, their drivers climbing out with hands visible. Knowing when a fight was lost, Noor pulled herself from the gallery, soaked and shaking, and stood at the edge of the creek. Water ran clear and strong, carrying sediment and memory, scouring away a century of silence. Eli wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "You did it. We did it," she corrected. Dawn came quietly, the storm spent. Federal rangers processed the scene, photographing disabled equipment and seizing burner phones. Carmen stood with a legal pad documenting everything, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes satisfied. Victor Kincaid was led to a government SUV, his urbane polish finally cracked, replaced with something brittle and frightened. Bram followed an hour later, his badge already surrendered. The creek ran steadily now. Not the torrent of last night, but a genuine flow, filling pools that hadn't held water since before anyone living could remember. Emma stood at the bank with Hannah, watching sunlight catch the ripples. "Thank you," Emma said, "for giving me back his name." Noor watched the water. Somewhere beneath it, the gallery stood intact, its evidence preserved, its story no longer secret. The pale raven returned as the sun climbed higher, settling on a cottonwood branch that overhung the new running creek. It preened once, tilted its head as if checking their work, then settled to rest. For the first time in over a century, Calico Creek remembered itself. And that memory, Noor knew, had teeth. 6 weeks after the creek ran again, Noor stood in a federal courtroom in Phoenix, watching Victor Kincaid III's attorneys argue for dismissal. They wore expensive suits and spoke in the language of technicalities, trying to reduce conspiracy to record-keeping irregularities and attempted evidence destruction to emergency site management. Carmen Duarte methodically demolished each argument with burner phone logs, GPS timestamps, sworn statements from Tuck Beaumont, and the ledgers themselves, now authenticated by 3 independent historians. The judge, a woman in her 60s who'd grown up on a ranch in Apache County, listened with an expression that gave nothing away. When Victor's lead attorney finished, she removed her glasses and spoke directly to Victor. "Mr. Kincaid, I've read the briefs. I've reviewed the evidence. Your family built a fortune on engineered theft and documented murder. That you attempted to destroy evidence of these crimes using the same tactics your ancestors employed suggests you understood exactly what you were protecting." She replaced her glasses. "Motion to dismiss denied. This case proceeds to trial." "Bail revoked." Victor's face went pale. As marshals led him out, his eyes found Noor's. There was no urbane polish left, just cold fury and the recognition of absolute defeat. Outside the courthouse, news crews waited. Noor gave a brief statement, careful and measured, crediting Carmen, Owen, Hannah, and the community. When reporters pushed for drama, for treasure and gold, she redirected every time. This was about water rights and murdered families. Everything else is secondary. Eli drove them back to Calico Bend in comfortable silence, the kind siblings shared after battles fought together. The valley looked different now. Greener along the creek corridor, where cottonwoods that hadn't leafed in decades were putting out new growth. Sheriff Bram had pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice and falsification of records. His resignation came with a 2-year suspended sentence and permanent disqualification from law enforcement. The county appointed an interim sheriff, a woman from Flagstaff with no local ties and a reputation for transparency. But the real changes were slower, more fundamental. Carmen's consent decree, negotiated over 3 intense weeks, reshaped water rights across the valley. Kincaid Industries' assets were frozen pending restitution. The drain gallery became a protected heritage site under joint federal and tribal jurisdiction. And most significantly, a community water bank was established, co-managed by the BLM and the Yavapai Nation, with priority access for families whose ancestors had held original claims. Emma Alvarez Chen was one of 12 families who received formal recognition and compensation. The money came from liquidated Kincaid holdings, not taxpayers. Carmen insisted on that. Justice, she said, shouldn't be paid for by people who'd already been victimized. Hannah Zhou transformed the old Grange Hall into something unexpected. The Ledger Room, a traveling exhibit that opened locally before moving to schools across the state. She curated it with an archivist's precision and a storyteller's heart, centering the murdered miners and their families, showing their claim maps and letters and photographs alongside the evidence of what had been done to them. On opening day, 200 people came. Some were descendants, finding family members they'd been told had simply drifted away. Others were locals, confronting uncomfortable truths about how their town had prospered. Hannah stood in the center of it all, fielding questions, making connections, finally receiving recognition for scholarship that had been dismissed as fringe for years. Turns out people care about history when it's about real harm, she told Noor Riley. Who knew? Owen Blackwater organized the first ceremonial flow release with Yavapai elders, a quiet gathering at dawn that Noor was honored to attend. An elder named Agnes spoke in Yavapai, her words translated by her grandson, about water as memory and justice as restoration. Then they opened the monitoring gate, allowing flow to pulse through the channel in a pattern that matched seasonal rhythms from before the theft. Noor watched the water move with a hydrologist's eye and something deeper. This was what she'd hoped for when she started her scrappy YouTube channel, proof that broken systems could be healed, that engineering could serve repair instead of extraction. She and Eli installed open-source sensors along the creek, posting real-time data to a public dashboard that anyone could access. Flow rate, temperature, dissolved oxygen, turbidity. The creek's vital signs, transparent and monitored. Think this will keep them honest? Eli asked, tightening the last sensor mount. It'll make dishonesty harder, Noor replied. That's a start. Eli had decided to return to teaching, but differently. He developed a field curriculum that brought students to the creek bed, teaching history through hydrology, showing them how systems worked and failed and could be rebuilt. His first group of 8th graders spent a week mapping the watershed and interviewing Owen about tribal water management. One kid told him it was the first time history felt like it mattered too right now. Tuck Beaumont found work with a solar installation company, taking a pay cut but gaining something he hadn't realized he'd lost, the ability to sleep without nightmares. He also started running safety trainings for construction crews, teaching them how to recognize and refuse illegal orders. Carmen connected him with a victims advocate program, and slowly, the weight of what he'd done, and nearly done, began to lighten when he ran into Noor at the hardware store. He stopped her with a quiet, "Thank you. You're the one who cut that hydraulic line," she said. "Yeah, but you gave me a reason to." He nodded once and walked on. And that was enough. Aunt Pilar's roadside stand became an unofficial information center, her tamales famous now. Her walls covered with photocopies of the claim maps and family trees that Hannah was still piecing together. She'd been interviewed by 3 podcasts and a documentary crew, and she treated all of it with the same amused practicality she brought to everything else. "People keep asking if I'm surprised," she told Noor over coffee. "I'm not. My generation knew there were bodies under this valley's fortune. We just didn't have the proof. You found the receipts? Nia Sloane's podcast won a Peabody. She donated the prize money to a legal fund for families pursuing restitution claims in other valleys, other stolen creeks. Her second season focused on water theft across the West. Each episode dedicated to a place where aquifers had been engineered silent and communities erased by manufactured scarcity. 3 months after the forum, a dedication ceremony was held at the creek. Emma Alvarez Chen spoke, her voice steadier now, holding her infant daughter against one hip. "My great-great-grandfather Alvaro died trying to protect water rights for his community. For over a century, his name was buried with him. But you," she gestured to Noor, Owen, Hannah, Carmen, "you returned his name to water. You made him real again. And now my daughter will grow up knowing who he was, what he fought for, and that in the end his fight wasn't lost. Just delayed." She walked to the creek's edge and opened her locket, letting water run over her fingers before closing it again. "Gracias, bisabuelo. Your creek flows again." Noor didn't trust herself to speak, so she simply stood with the others, watching the water catch afternoon light. That evening, she returned alone to the waymark stones. Someone, probably Owen, had carved new marks beside the old tallies, translating theft counts into restoration measures. Flow rates, dates of returned water rights, family names restored to records. The stones were no longer monuments to disappearance. They were ledgers of return. The pale raven appeared as the sun dropped toward the ridge, settling on the uppermost stone with a soft clatter of wings. It watched Noor with black eyes that seemed impossibly wise, impossibly patient. Then it lifted, circled once over the running creek, and settled again, tucking its wings with an air of finality, not leaving this time. Staying. "You remember, don't you?" Noor said quietly to the bird, to the creek, to the valley. "You remember what was stolen? And what we gave back?" The raven tilted its head but didn't fly. Below it, the creek ran clear and strong, carrying sediment and snowmelt and memory downstream. The sound of it filled the valley, a voice that had been silent for so long people had forgotten how to hear it. Noor pulled out her phone and framed one last shot. Evening light on moving water, waymark stones standing witness, the pale raven perched like a blessing or a judgment or both. She posted it to her channel with a simple caption: "Some debts take a century to pay, but water remembers, and so do we." Comments flooded in within minutes, but she pocketed the phone without reading them. The story had been told. The creek was running. The names had been returned. Everything else was just echo. She walked back to the truck where Eli waited, listening to a podcast about floodplain restoration. He looked up as she climbed in, and without a word, they drove home through the gathering dark, past the creek that sang beside them all the way. Behind them, the pale raven watched until the taillights disappeared. Then it turned its attention to the water, to the work of remembering, which was also the work of guarding. Some debts, once paid, had to be protected. The moon rose over Calico Bend, and the creek ran on. Up next we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.